Is the vengeful spirit of a man named Carl Pruitt to blame for a string of unexplained deaths in the Rust Belt through the 40s and 50s? Or did the legend of the Kentucky Chain Strangler itself become a ghost story, lost in the light of the digital age? Pulaski County, Kentucky, 1938. Carl Pruitt is a hard-working carpenter, struggling to make it through the Great Depression, which has cast a shadow of misery over the United States. Nearly half the country was unemployed, and the economy was in shambles. Pruitt is one of the few Americans lucky enough to still have a job. He excitedly returns home early one night to his wife, looking forward to finding dinner on the table and perhaps a stiff glass of moonshine. What he finds instead is his wife in the arms of another man. His wife's lover escapes through the window. Carl Pruitt's wife, however, is not so lucky. Enraged, Carl grabs a chain and strangles her to death. His calloused hands, strengthened by years of hard labor, clench the links as they dig into her throat. Her body falls to the floor. Realizing what he's done, Carl Pruitt grabs a pistol. His vengeance and his pain are silenced forever by the squeeze of a trigger. He's buried, alone, far from his wife's grave, at the behest of her surviving family. But his spirit isn't done yet. Weeks would pass before Carl would claim another victim. Word spreads quickly through Pulaski County, not just of the horrific crime, but of the perpetrator's resting place. The grave is haunted, locals say. The grass around it has died, becoming discolored, forming the shape of a chain around the tombstone, keeping Carl's interment strangled, prolonging the suffering he thought he could escape. As with any legend, this attracts the curious, and we all know what curiosity did to the cat. So what could it do to a delinquent biker? A group of children, led by one James Collins, went to the cemetery to harass the spirit that was said to be haunting Carl's grave. James, unafraid of a folk story, began to toss rocks at the gravestone and mock Carl for his suicide and for being a wife killer. When nothing happened, the kids rode off into the night, in search of another thrill. Unfortunately, James wouldn't live to see morning. He was involved in a bizarre accident, which resulted in him crashing his bike and allegedly being strangled by the bike's chain. James was laid to rest soon after, but his grief-stricken mother needed more than the story that he had died in a freak accident. She needed revenge. She took a hatchet to Carl's grave, chipping it away and smashing it until she was satisfied. Having destroyed it to her satisfaction, she went home. She was found later among the fluttering of sheets, shirts, and blouses on her clothes line. At some point doing laundry, she tripped and became entangled with the chain-link clothesline, which was found wrapped around her neck, having strangled her. When locals went to Carl's grave, the damage that had been allegedly done by James and his mother was gone. The stone was as good as new. Sometime later, a local farmer passed by the cemetery. He was allegedly riding in a horse-drawn carriage with his family. They began to talk about the legend of Carl Pruitt, and the farmer brandished his revolver, declaring that he wasn't afraid of Carl or the legend. He fired at the tombstone, and that would be the last thing he would ever do. The horses, seemingly alarmed, began to buck. His family jumped from the carriage, but the farmer remained, certain that he could tame these beasts. They bolted, and the farmer was taken on a ride to hell. His family soon found him, and the wrecked carriage destroyed on the side of the road. The farmer, strangled by the carriage reins. Never bring a gun to a ghost fight. So what do you bring? How about the Dark Frontier channel? Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell to be prepared for anything that could come your way. Now, understandably, the locals were spooked by this string of deaths. Pleading to their local officials for intervention, 2 investigators would be dispatched to Kentucky to investigate the phenomenon. At the cemetery, one investigator took a picture of the scene, but was reportedly less than impressed with the legend of this local specter. The officers left, but soon were chased by a light that had come from the cemetery. The light caught up to them and their car careened off the road. The officer who had laughed about Carl and his legend was dead, nearly decapitated by the chain of a fence they had crashed through. Several months later, the Chain Strangler would claim his next victim. Local Arthur Lewis had had enough. He took a hammer and chisel and made his way to the cemetery. He would destroy the tombstone once and for all. Throughout the night, the metallic rhythm of hammering could be heard through the area, until it was cut short, replaced by a blood-curdling scream. The locals rushed to the scene, only to find Arthur dead at the base of the tombstone, strangled to death by the chain that had been used to lock the cemetery every night. So, research conducted on Carl Pruitt and his victims yielded results that were at best tenuous and at worst non-existent. While the legend gives names and a general location, no newspapers or police reports have ever corroborated the story. Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Virginia all have Pulaski counties, and none of those seem to be haunted by a Mr. Pruitt. Census and death records of Pulaski County failed to turn up anyone matching the name James Collins, Arthur Lewis, or Carl Pruitt. There was one possible match: an Enos C. Pruitt, who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the brain on November 7, 1910, around Louisville, Kentucky. It's certainly possible that Enos was the basis for the Pulaski County Pruitt, and morphed into the character he became to fit local superstitions. There was also a farmer by the name of Arthur Lewis. He died July 6, 1914, mere counties away from Pulaski. A 2016 investigation by the website Cult Nation notes that contacting Pulaski County's Historical Society yielded no results. They directed me to a woman who runs a website that collects and archives the history of the area, particularly murders. Miss Whitaker had never heard of the legend of Carl Pruitt's ghost either, which was particularly troubling given that no one who lived in or around Pulaski County and whose work it was to know its local history and legends had ever heard of the murderous ghost that supposedly had caused a congressman to launch an investigation that ended with the near decapitation of a police officer. So where did this legend come from? The Cult Nation investigation revealed that the first written account of the Pruitt legend stems from a 2000 book titled Beyond the Grave by Troy Taylor. Did Taylor's research for his book uncover something more compelling than a vengeful ghost, in the form of how ghost stories like the Kentucky Chain Strangler are told and what they represent? Long before those hungry for hauntings could open a tab on Google or find a really cool YouTube channel, these curiosities were quenched by the chilling chatter of talkative townsfolk, eager to pepper their cautionary warnings to the younger generation with a supernatural spice that was sure to hammer the point home, in the form of goosebumps and nightmares. Was Carl Pruitt a Depression-era story told to ward off thrill-seeking youth from desecrating graves, to urge them not to judge those that came before? Or was he a spirit so sinister and so real that any record of his existence was erased from history?